welcome back to the booth. Mythic Championship 1 from Cleveland. That's Paul Chi and I'm Marshall Sutcliffe. Thanks so much for coming along for coverage of the booster draft here to kick things off here on day number 1. Now, we've been following the story of Siggy, Mike Sigrist, as he's worked his way through this draft. We watched his draft. We watched round 1. He lost. We watched round 2. He won that one, and we're going to get to watch round number 3 right now. We've got Mike Sigrist sitting across from Stuart Parnes. They're both at 1-1, and this is a big one. You come out of that first draft pod with a 2-1, and you feel like, okay, we're doing fine. We're on track. Everything is okay. A 1-2, that feels a lot different.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I mean, once because you really always want to be positioning yourself for the top 8, and coming out of the draft 1-2. I mean,
you're on track.
And not only that, people often say the limited is what kind of makes or breaks your top 8 chances.
Yeah, because you have a little bit less control about what you open. Players are ready. Let's head on down. It's time for round number 3 here from Mythic Championship, Cleveland. Hello and welcome back to coverage of Mythic Championship 1 from Cleveland, Ohio. I'm Marshall Sutcliffe in the booth with Paul Chi, and we are all set for round 3 action, where we have on the left-hand side of your screen, that's Mike Sigrist from Team Channel Fireball and the Magic Pro League. We watched him draft an Azorius control deck, and he's looking to scrap out a 2-1 with this thing if he can win this match against his competitor here, Stuart Parnes from the United States, plays for Team RIW Hobbies. And again, Stuart's also 1-1, and both of these players really looking to capture that 2-1 coming out of the draft. That is a respectable finish and something that you can look forward to saying, okay, if I can do well and construct it, I'll be off to the races here. A 1-2, on the other hand, is a bumpy start, and so there's actually a lot on the line for these players. Now, Paul, what you see is actually pre-game actions taking place. This is Sigrist has revealed Sphinx of Foresight and is resolving his Scry 3.
Yep. Very, very big here. And I'm really excited, actually, for this matchup because I like both players' decks. They're both, Stuart's playing in Esper strategy with lots of gates, some gate payoff cards. Oops, can't play that one. That was a Senate Guildmage there. But both decks are just kind of grindy, controlling decks. And just curious to see how all the cards will play out. Now, Mike Sigrist, of course, we know has a ton of card draw in his deck, but Stuart also has some pretty powerful, I guess I want to say mirror breaker type cards for the matchup as well. So,
what kind of stuff are you looking at from Stuart? What are the key cards that our viewers can kind of latch onto, where if they see it, it could be a big step in, for a win for Stuart?
I think the biggest card here is Angelic Exaltation. He's got Angelic Exaltation.
And look,
in
this
his
is
deck.
why, by the way.
Right. Now, Mike Sigrist has an excellent removal in his Azorius deck because he has 3 copies of Lawmage's Binding, but Angelic Exaltation allows you to kind of sidestep that because, sure, you can use removal spells on some of my creatures, but if you can't, even this Twilight Panther, for example, if this is the creature that stays on the board, it can still attack for tons of damage if you get that Exaltation on the battlefield.
All right, so we'll be keeping an eye on that to see if Stuart Parnes can find his copy of Angelic Exaltation. He's got a few other things that work well in a matchup like this. This, to me, at least on paper, looks like it's going to be a very interesting fight between these players. Mike Sigrist with that, well, the quickest start his deck can have, which is the Caracal there. He's going to trade it off for the Panther, so Catfight, and then boom, we've got the Senate Courier to follow up, and this is more typical for what Mike does.
Right. I will say, though, Mike really does kind of just want to play against these slower strategies. That's kind of what his deck was setting up to do with all the counter magic in his deck. So he has to be feeling reasonable about what he's seeing so far.
Boy, but Mike really has struggled somehow with his blue mana from what we've seen. He's got 3 copies of Thought Collapse in his deck and just really has often struggled to keep them up. And once again, he's missing a second blue mana source, so he's going to play Sphinx's Insight on his main phase here. He's going to get that 2 life point bump and try to dig deeper into his deck. And once again, he didn't find it. It ended up being a Plains that he found. But he actually has a spell he can cast with it. He's going to Sky Tether the Azorius Night Arbiter. But this is all playing into what you mentioned before, where if Stuart can kind of move things forward and end up finding himself in a position where he can land Angelic Exaltation, he only needs one creature, one creature that's able to attack, and his board will likely just be littered with other creatures that are locked up under various enchantments like you see right here.
And Stuart's got to be really excited that Mike Sigrist hasn't been able to find that second island, because he knows Mike has that Sphinx of Foresight in his hand, but he's just unable to cast it.
Yeah, you know, another thing that's interesting about the way that Stuart's put this deck together is it's a fairly greedy build. You know, he's playing a Basilica Bell Hunt in this deck, right? Even though he's primarily Azoria, so he's kind of splashing a little bit. But he's got gates to do it, so it is well within reason. But the more importantly here, he will actually have time to find his mana in this matchup. So this will actually benefit Stuart going forward.
But look at what's happening here. Mike Sigrist has fired off 2 copies of Sphinx's Insight, so he's just slowly grinding and getting ahead in terms of just raw cards.
I see a Colossus in hand now for Stuart, and while the shields are relatively down, we may see him just fire that off.
Right, so the Gate Colossus here currently would be a 6-mana spell with 2 gates on the battlefield. Now if Stuart plays an untapped land or a gate, he can't play the Colossus.
Well, he looks like he didn't have it, so he's going to go for Shimmer of Possibility. Stuart is playing what is my favorite and most drafted archetype, which is Esper in this, and I like the way that he's done it. I think it's appropriate to be a little bit greedy with these decks and push the boundaries of your mana a fair bit, because you can play mediocre late pick cards like Shimmer of Possibility, which really go the distance in decks like this.
Right, it even just helps you fix your mana.
Which is what he's doing here. I think he took a swamp, right?
Yeah, on top of that, specifically with the Esper color combination, the amount of just great splashable cards, there's just a lot of overlap between those color combinations. Cards like the Arbiter, cards like Lawmage's Binding, all those cards you would splash even if you were an Orzhov deck. Or go the other way, right? You would play Grasping Thralls and Final Payments in any combination of of these colors. So I think that's another reason why people really favorite this specific combination if they want to go 3 colors. You see, for example, I think you see Esper control decks far more often than you see like a Teamer deck.
That's right. Now this is an interesting situation too. Another way for Stuart to take advantage of the type of removal that Mike is running is Bloodmist Infiltrator. He now has multiple attacks where the Bloodmist Infiltrator will be unblockable at really no strong cost to Stuart.
And Mike, it looks like he's pretty far ahead in terms of cards, but not really putting a lot of pressure. But he does find the second blue source here for the Sphinx of Foresight. Does Stuart Parnes have a removal spell? He has done a good amount of digging already. He's sacked a Locket. He's played a Shimmer Possibility.
He actually does have a removal spell, though it's not the one that he wants. He has Summary Judgment in his hand right now, but unfortunately, he will have to take a hit from the Sphinx before he's able to even attempt to fire that off.
All right, and
we'll see if Mike has a Summary Judgment of his own, but it looks like he doesn't, so this Bloodmist Infiltrator will crack in for 3, though I will say that Mike, being at 24 life, that's a long way to go. And there it is, Gate Colossus, one of the stronger uncommons in the set, and Mike is going to need to find another one of his answers. I believe he already has another copy of Lawmage's Binding in his hand for it as well.
Right.
Yeah, there it is.
And that is the absolute, one of the best answers. It might just be the best answer for Gate Colossus in the format, because if you do use an actual removal spell to get it into your graveyard, most decks will eventually just be able to find another gate and put it back on top of your library.
How annoyed do you think Sigrist is right now, though?
Why is that?
Well, because Stuart has a way to put it back in his graveyard.
Oh,
the Bloodmist Infiltrator, and he even gets to get a little value off of it.
Right.
That's going to sting.
But also, at the same time, Mike doesn't really have a choice here, right?
You can't take hits from the Colossus.
You cannot just take hits from the Gate Colossus, so he might just need to fire that off.
Look at Mike not attacking with his Sphinx of Foresight here, just leaving it back. And I think what we're going to do is see him cast Chillbringer here to tap down the Gate Colossus and try to run Stuart out of creatures to sacrifice so that he can maybe find an answer for the Bloodmist Infiltrator before firing off that Lawmage's Binding. Mike Sigrist is just a master at this stuff.
But what's actually interesting here is Mike actually has a Summary Judgment in hand. So he could have played Summary Judgment on the tapped Bloodmist Infiltrator and also play Lawmage's Binding on the Gate Colossus, but he actually wanted to put a little more pressure on the battlefield by playing this, playing the Chillbringer.
I mean, that is so insane. Normally, you'd think, I just need to do this, but Mike is just one step ahead and taking advantage of every tiny edge that he can squeeze out of this game. I'm so impressed by the way he plays.
6 mana. Is this an Archway Angel? Ooh, this is a lot of life, or 4 life.
It's 4, but
4
still,
life.
that's a good amount. I don't think that Sigrist cares particularly about the life, but the 3/4 flyer's nice. And was that no attack there from Stuart?
Right. He could have sacked the Arbiter, but chose not to. Because, keep in mind, that one doesn't have a binding on it. That one actually can still just block ground creatures.
Right, of which there are none.
There are none, but you don't know that necessarily. And Mike is at a pretty comfortable 21 life, so it might be better to just have more creatures in play for the potential of drawing something like in Angelic Exaltation.
But Sigrist wanted him to attack so badly
yeah.
there, because now the window has closed, and if Sigrist is forced to use the Law Mage's Binding on the Colossus, that is not a long-term game plan thanks to the Infiltrator. Now, Mike does actually have a plan that will work, but it requires using 2 Law Mage's Bindings. If he Law Mage's Bindings, then Stuart attacks, then he can fire off the Summary Judgment on the Bloodmist Infiltrator, and then when the Gate Colossus eventually comes back, he will have an answer for it. But that is not a clean way to do this.
Yeah. Also, keep in mind, Stuart only has 2 cards left in hand. It's very. The thing is, if Stuart had a gate, there's a possibility he would have played the gate last turn just to gain an additional 2 life off the Archway Angel. So, you know, there is also just a chance that Stuart just doesn't have another gate to get back the Colossus.
Yeah. Now, I think that, like, that's reasonable to assume for the moment, but not for the rest of the game.
Right.
Right.
And look at this, Mike.
Oh, he's not doing this
Pedal
at
to
all.
the metal here. He is ready to just crash in and just try to race Stuart because he sees kind of that inevitability, right? You see that Gate Colossus on the battlefield, so you know that at some point, if you do try to drag this game on a little bit longer, Stuart will eventually find a gate to put that Colossus on top, and Mike doesn't really have a lot of great answers to it. So, yeah, I like this play. Mike just putting Stuart now on a 2-turn clock, it looks like.
Yeah, but we're going to see Stuart crack back here very nicely in his own way because he gets to now use his own Summary Judgment to take down that key flyer, the Sphinx of Foresight, and this is a good step in the right direction for him, though he is going to need a bit more than that.
Right. And does he? It looks like there's also Basilica Bell Hunt, so I think he could do both.
That's right. So that's an important step for Stuart Parnes to try to fight his way back into this game because now Mike has really kind of done what he's going to do, right? I mean, those were the big interactions that he had access to, and Stuart looks like he's just going to chip in. If it's a free attack, he says, I'm just going to not even bother sacking anything, which signals to Mike that he doesn't have a gate in his hand, and there's the Bell Hunt.
Right, and this is going to gain him some very important life here. Put another threat out onto the battlefield here, so this might kind of halt the aggression from the Senate Courier.
The untamed aggression from that 1/4 flyer. Sigrist had to decide between getting rid of a Fairy Duelist or the Benthic Biomancer. He wanted to keep the Summary Judgment in his hand.
Ooh, and that was a good draw from Mike.
Yeah, he found a Sphinx's Insight off the top of the library here, which will allow him to cast that and still have either of those 2 cards I just mentioned available to him.
Right, and now he can still attack with that Chillbringer. That Chillbringer does put Stuart on a 4-turn clock here. Ooh, getting very aggressive, attacking also with the Senate Courier.
Yeah, it turns out 3-turn clock is better. He's going to need answers for a lot of stuff. He does have 20 life to work with, though, so that's really nice. He is considering using the Summary Judgment right now on the Bloodmist Infiltrator. That would disallow Stuart the ability to sacrifice the Gate Colossus, but Mike says, you know what, he doesn't have a gate right now. I will take my chances and just produce another flyer and a land and pass the turn back. This is a really interesting spot of this game because right now Mike Sigrist is ahead on board, but it will not take a whole lot for Stuart Parnes to turn the ship back in his direction, particularly if he can kill the Chillbringer.
Right, and now he has sacrificed the Gate Colossus here. And it looks like he's going to spectacle out a Blade Juggler after this attack.
Yeah, if he finds a removal spell, he could be in good shape here.
Yeah, and again, we talked about one of the weaknesses with Mike Sigrist's deck is just not a lot of ways to win the game, not a lot of threats. So if Stuart can find a way to get that Chillbringer off the battlefield.
I think he drew a Chillbringer. He did.
That was a huge draw for
Massive draw for Stuart Parnes. Putting him right back very much in this game, locking out that opposing Chillbringer and making it so that Mike has no good attacks anymore. So Stuart at a comfortable 7 And he's ahead on board now. Mike still has that summary judgment, so he can use that to take down one of the 2 tap threats on the other side and start to mitigate those losses. But this one might be slipping away from Sigrist.
Right. But yeah, Stuart's Chillbringer just being on the battlefield just makes it so that Mike doesn't really have any reasonable attacks. The only thing he could do is just try to offer the trade with the dueling Chillbringers.
Sigrist just says go.
But Stuart... Yeah, Stuart does have... I guess he can still attack with the Bell Hunt and the Juggler and be willing to trade off the Juggler with Concordia Pegasus if Mike Sigrist chooses to double block the Blade Juggler here with that attack.
Which he most certainly will, right? Because he kind of needs to try to set this up for the next turn.
Yeah, and Stuart
Parnes
also
is out
has...
of gas, though. This is interesting. And look at this. Everything in the red zone here for Stuart, including sacrificing his Archway Angel, which is going to get that Blood Mist Infiltrator in as unblockable. This is aggressive stuff here from Stuart. He's trying to turn the tables back on Mike Sigrist, but this looks pretty good for him.
I think this is going to be a really good exchange for Mike. If you take a look at Mike's hand...
It's a Fairy Duelist.
And a Summary Judgment.
Yeah.
This is big.
He even has the ability to keep up Thought Collapse after all of this as well.
Yeah.
So first things first, kill your flyer with Summary Judgment. That's 2 mana for a 5 mana creature. That is a great exchange for Sigrist, and that's exactly how you get right back in the game. Now he's got Fairy Duelist before blocks to shrink down the Juggler.
So now he can block the Bell Hunt, kill the Juggler, lose no creatures, and only take 3 damage.
Ooh,
what a turnaround.
What a swing there. The patience of Mike Sigrist really paying off for him at this point. And remember, he has Chillbringer. Like, that Chillbringer did not die to the opposing Chillbringer. It merely was tapped down, and it will be back next turn. Sigrist has to decide if he wants to counter this Concordia Pegasus with only 1 card left, but he says, nah, it's fine.
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
fine,
I mean, there's some concern about over the Blood Mist Infiltrator, but 11 is still a fairly comfortable life total, especially with that Thought Collapse in hand. So I think this might be Vigilance and just a swing with everything, potentially.
Yep, you're right.
Yep.
Everything's in the red zone. And that Vigilance coming in very handy because currently that Courier is holding back 3 power on the other side of the battlefield and maybe even 6 if Stuart ends up with nothing reasonable to sacrifice to the Infiltrator. So Mike really may have turned the corner here. That got sketchy in the middle for Sigrist, and Stuart looked like he may have had the right sequence to kind of pull back ahead. One thing that's also happened is that Gate Colossus has stayed in the graveyard.
Yep.
And that's a big deal too.
And now this is going to put Stuart down to 2. So not a whole lot of cards. I mean, I think this one is just over because
of the Thought Collapse.
Because of the Thought Collapse in Mike's hand.
And that's exactly the case. He draws another land, and Stuart Parnes with 2 lands in hand says, I've seen enough. I'm going to scoop him up. And Mike Sigrist really kind of sprung his trap, right? He was like building up his board, and then he went removal, attack you with all my stuff, and kind of said, you're going to have to come up with some way to deal with this game plan. And as it turned out, Stuart did, but it wasn't a permanent solution, and Mike Sigrist was able to finish him off there down the stretch. So what we're going to do here is we're going to take a short commercial break. When we come back, though, we'll have more live Magic here from Mythic Championship Cleveland. We'll see you in just a few.
By the way, I love when this type of matchup goes into sideboarding because people go real deep. You know what I mean?
Oh, totally. And welcome back to the feature match area here at Mythic Championship Cleveland. I'm Marshall Sutcliffe in the booth with Paul Cheon, and we are underway in round number 3, where we're watching our feature drafter, Mike Sigrist from the Magic Pro League and Team Channel Fireball, looking to try to secure a 2-1 victory here. Now, Paul, unbeknownst to our many fans, we were actually chatting in between rounds about the potential for some pretty deep sideboarding in these matchups where both players have the idea of having the game go long. Do you see anything that stood out to you as potential ways for a player to get an edge here?
Yeah, so based on that, on game 1, Stuart saw multiple Law Mage's Bindings and a Sky Tether. So one card that I would be interested to see if he actually has, that he chooses to bring in, is a card like Bankrupt in Blood. Because those games go long, right? If the games go long,
Interesting.
Mike is going to start putting a bunch of those Law Mage's Bindings on cards, and that's one way to kind of cash in those creatures for cards. On top of that, I think a card that would be very, very strong is a card like Just a Car's Portal, right?
Just this year's
Just
Portal.
this year's Portal,
Yeah.
because that is a way to basically,
Wow.
that's basically a 2-mana Demystify against the type of enchantments that
Great point.
that Mike has.
We'll see
in his
that
deck.
for sure.
Yeah,
right?
definitely.
Let's take a quick look in here at Ken Yukihiro versus Shaheen Sarani. We heard that Shaheen was 2-0 and really wanted to escape the limited rounds with a 3-0 because he feels like his brew in Standard is quite a nice one, though he also always feels like that.
Yeah.
But it looks like Dovin's Acuity is kind of doing its thing here for Ken Yukihiro. But we are split at a game apiece, and players are playing very quickly. 9-7 are the life totals. Generally speaking, you would favor Shaheen in that situation, given that he's the aggressor. But Dovin's Acuity could do a long way.
Right. And also,
and he's also got an Ill-Gotten Inheritance.
Ill-Gotten Inheritance
Yeah.
in play, right? And Shaheen is currently
I think
sitting at
Shaheen's
7.
actually just going to cycle a Blade Brand here.
Interesting.
Yeah, it just needs a card, it looks like. And since there's no blockers, he's just going to go for grabbing an extra card. He does have 5 power at the ready.
Right, but Ken is representing lethal damage there because a tick from the Ill-Gotten Inheritance, 2 damage from the Thopters would put Shaheen down to 4, and then Ken, all he needs to do is just sacrifice the Ill-Gotten Inheritance for the final 4 points of damage. So Shaheen needs a way to get one of those Thopters off the battlefield or find a way to gain some life.
First things first, attack for 5. Ooh, and look at this. He did the Marshall. He's sacrificing his Dovin's Acuity. And look, you know, sometimes your deck isn't fully built around the card, and you can just go ahead and throw it away to a final payment. And that's exactly what he does. But that reduces that attack from 5 down to 2. That means that Ken gets to stay at 7 life.
It's another Desperation Blade Brand here.
Wow, Shaheen's all about the Blade Brand, though. It doesn't look like it's working out for him because he's just cycling
the game, right?
them. And that should just be the game. You're down to 5. You take 2 more down to 3, and then I activate Ill-Gotten Inheritance, and it's GG.
Yep.
So that is Ken Yukihiro winning his pod, but still a good start from Shaheen Sarani. And, you know, if he does have a good constructed deck, we could see a nice run from Shaheen here.
Yeah, supposedly he had a very spicy brew, so kind of excited to see. I'm going to be very disappointed if it's just Esper control, because that's exactly what you would expect him to play coming into this tournament.
What if he's just like Island Terramander your move?
Yeah, that wouldn't be very spicy either.
That's not his. That's not his MO for sure. All right, so we've got Orzhov Gilgate to kick things off for Stuart.
And he has the portal in hand.
There you go. So right away, Stuart with the sharp sideboarding, bringing in, and look at this, 2 islands for Mike Sigrist. He finally is able to get his mana down, although we haven't actually seen white mana from him yet, so I might have spoken too soon. And here we go. Stuart's going to kick things off with Azorius Locket and triple island now, and kaboom.
Yeah, well,
Yeah.
this is kind of a slower matchup, so this isn't too surprising.
Still, he'd much rather leave up a Thought Collapse here, would he not?
Right, so this just tells me that he probably doesn't have one in hand.
Yeah, exactly. And here we go, turn 4 on the play for Stuart Parnes, and he's got the Azorius Night Arbiter down. So significantly ahead on board, although there is a Plains now from Mike. The windows, the door's open, he could walk right through and take care of that Night Arbiter if he has a removal spell for it, like a Law Mage's Binding.
Yeah, and if he does have a card like a Law Mage's Binding, I think he wants to fire it off in his main phase because Stuart does have islands in his deck, so you just want to make sure you play around opposing quenches and Thought Collapses.
No, the assault continues. Another Senate Courier.
Double this power. This is going to be
got the 9-turn clock in effect here for Mike Sigrist. Fear it.
Oh, and look at this.
Wow. Curving 2 gates and a locket into Gate Colossus. And this is a major issue for Sigrist. If he doesn't have an answer for it quickly, we could see this thing be done. And as we've noted before, the best answer in the format, which is what Sigrist needs here, is Law Mage's Binding, and Stuart already has the answer for it.
Right.
There's a Law Mage's Binding in hand for Mike, so he does have the ability to interact here. Does he do it now? No. He's actually got something even a little better for this turn. He's got a Chillbringer.
Okay.
Which is actually a powerful flying attacker.
Right. But Stuart still has a pretty strong hand here. He's got this attack, and then he's got a Blade Juggler to follow this up.
Which is exactly what he's going to play here after the attack. So Azorius Knight, you know, not really the card that was meant to trigger Spectacle, but hey, it does a really good job of it when you get to do it.
Right. But here's actually a very relevant card here in the Pegasus. This does slow down Mike Sigrist's attack. He can no longer get in with those Senate Couriers unless he attacks with all the flyers.
Yeah, and at this point, one of the Couriers blocking the Blade Juggler is tempting, so he's just going to attack for 3 in the air with the Chillbringer.
But now Mike does need to answer that Gate Colossus.
Yeah,
so
he can't block it.
It looks like he's really hesitant to fire it off, though.
You know, I think that the players have a chance to look at the pools from their opponent and probably predicted that just this year's Portal would come in after the way the game 1 went. It's really interesting because he could leave the door open and cast it on Stuart's turn before combat, which would prevent Stuart from being able to save it immediately. But he's going to go for main phase, which means that Stuart will have that Colossus ready to attack on his turn.
Oh, yeah, this is big.
Yep. And Mike knows this is coming.
Yeah, I think he considered doing it on his main phase to play around Quench, but
yep.
the value of actually being able to attack is just way too big here.
Yep. And so he's just going to run it out, and boom, there it is. Gate Colossus on the battlefield for Stuart. And that is a major issue for Mike. It's a 2-turn clock all on its own, and none of Mike's creatures besides Chillbringer can interact with it in combat.
Right. This is just 10 points of unblockable damage coming in.
Fairy
8 points of
Duelist
unblockable
is
damage
going
coming
to reduce
in.
that by 2, but that's just not enough to actually affect the board in a meaningful way, although it does affect the clock. No, it actually doesn't. He's still at 8 now, facing 10, unless he leaves back Chillbringer to chump block, and that's, of course, not going to be a winning combination for Sigrist.
Now Stuart has a Senate Guildmage.
Nice. Wow.
That up.
This is looking beautiful here for Stuart. His key sideboard decision of bringing in the just this year's Portal really swinging this game
really
in his
heads
favor.
up sideboard card there.
Yep.
And now Mike really needs to find another Sky Tether or a Slime. No, Slime Bind would not do it. Sky Tether or another Law Mage's Binding to actually deal with that Colossus.
Chillbringer continues to attack. And I think that what's going to have to happen here is Sigrist. He's got precognitive. Oh, he actually found the other Law Mage's Binding.
He does have one. Okay.
I think he's going to go to the upkeep and then cast it, which is what he's done here. And right now, Stuart could crack his locket, though I don't know if he has any counter spells anyway.
Right.
So I think that this is actually going to work, and Law Mage's Binding is going to lock down the key threat. Wow, has Sigrist actually wrestled control back of this board? It feels precarious.
I think it's close, but I still like Stuart's side here. He's got the Senate Guildmage in play, which he can actually use to gain life or go through, or just filter through his deck. And he still has that Arbiter in play to get in for unblockable damage.
Yeah, I like his position here as well. That one hit from the Gate Colossus can matter huge. And right now, that Senate Guildmage represents such a huge advantage for Stuart. I mean, the truth is that Mike really wanted to use his Law Mage's Binding on that.
Right.
He just couldn't afford to let the Colossus live. So now we're going to see precognitive perception. And this is a situation that we described earlier where now lands are not what Mike wants. And so casting in your main phase has a huge upside.
Yeah, so this is the point of the game where Scry 3 is basically close to a full card. I think this
you
is
just bottom all those, right?
Looks like he kept a card.
He's keeping Thought Collapse. I wonder if Thought Collapse is really what he wants to see at this point, though. Ooh, hello.
Okay.
How about some Sphinx's Insight action?
Right, but he doesn't have Thought Collapse up this turn. He does still have an attack here if he wants with the Chillbringer. Can't get in with any of the other creatures. Stuart will also be able to crack his Azorius Locket here.
Wait. Oh, he found a Watchdog.
Like,
I thought he
one drop?
Well, I thought he found the Sky Tether.
Okay.
Which would have been excellent.
Right.
Instead, it was the Watchdog, which is doesn't really do much here.
Right.
This is big now for Stuart Parnes. He's going to crack this Locket on end step, and he needs to find something to stop that Chillbringer. If he does, he could be in pretty darn good shape here.
Right, but it can no longer be a spot removal spell because of the Resolute Watchdog.
Right.
But he found a really, really powerful card here. He found a Blood Mist Infiltrator.
Ooh.
Now, if he's holding a gate, he can use the Blood Mist Infiltrator's ability to sacrifice the Gate Colossus, play a gate, put it on top, and I'm not sure, but he might even be able to use the Senate Guildmage to loot, draw the Gate Colossus, and then play it for the turn.
Yeah, I mean, he needs the ability to sacrifice, though, the guy now.
Oh, right. It's an attack trigger. It's not a combat trigger.
But still,
right,
that is a plan that he can set up. He also has a Gateway Sneak that he's playing. And you mentioned if he has the gate, and he does. So this is the setup. Right now, Stuart Parnes is able to win this game quite easily if it goes for a few more turns. He just needs to survive.
Yeah, and keep in mind, Stuart just doesn't need, like, the life gain ability on the Senate Guildmage is extremely relevant here.
Yeah, I hate using that ability because I love looting, but boy, it makes a lot of sense here,
but in
doesn't
close
it?
races like this.
Yep. And this is a very, very close game. Mike Sigrist now is going to cast Sphinx's Insight on his main phase, go up to 6. Ooh. It's about as close as they get.
Yeah.
He brought in Screaming Shield.
Ooh, okay.
Against the Gate Colossus, it's always precarious, but...
Right. But this is one of those very slow matchups.
Another thing to consider here as well is that if Stuart needs to, he does have the Concordia Pegasus to chump block once.
Right.
It may be that time already, right? Because next turn's going to be disgusting for Stuart.
Oh, what is this?
It's another Sphinx's Insight. Because Stuart can do the play that you made. Let's see, can he play the gate first?
He might just loot now because he didn't take damage.
Mm-hmm.
So he might just loot because if he finds an Angelic Exaltation, he just wins the game.
He chose to just gain the life. He's playing it, I think, in his mind, safely.
And now he has the... Oh, this is kind of awkward.
It doesn't work quite the way you
Right.
want. Yeah, because he wants to play the gate first to trigger the Gateway Sneak and make sure that he can get the card and the 1 point of damage in. But the problem is that he needs to play the gate after the Gate Colossus is in the graveyard, and the only way to get it there currently is from the Infiltrator, which is
I don't think he has a lethal attack. So if he gets in with the Arbiter, the Infiltrator, and let's say he played a gate for the Sneak, that's 6 damage.
It's so close.
So he's one off.
And this is why, by the way, Sigrist said, well, I have to play both of these on my main phase and tap out, even though he has cards like Thought Collapse in his hand.
Yeah, so it does make sense to me to maybe just get in for 5. Oh, no, okay, he's
doing it.
He's going in for 6 here.
Yeah, the difference
Most of the
between
cards.
5 and 6 isn't super big.
Right, but he doesn't have another gate in hand to actually get
Right.
back the Colossus.
Right, or to trigger the Gateway Sneak next turn. Though he is drawing a card.
Right, right.
So let's see what he finds with it. He found a gate.
Okay.
Beautiful. He's got another Concordia Pegasus, and things are looking very good for Stuart Parnes. That was a great 2-turn sequence for him. Putting Mike Sigrist in effectively desperation mode. Oh, he finally found the Sky Tether. Is it too late?
Yeah, that's what it seems like to me.
Because he needs to be able to kill both creatures.
Right, didn't Mike take... wasn't Mike at 8? I thought he might have would have been at 1 now. But
3,
maybe
4,
not.
5, 6. He took 6. He was.
And he was
at 8.
he was at 8. I thought he was at 7. Sorry.
Yeah. But he needs to be able to kill both the Azorius Knight Arbiter and the Blood Mist Infiltrator, and that's just to, not die to the Gateway Sneak.
Ooh, and I mean, he's got a lot of stuff here. He has Sky Tether and the Slime Bind, so he actually can deal with.
He can do that.
Both of the unblockable creatures.
But he is no longer applying pressure.
Yeah.
To Stuart's life total, and that's a big problem.
And Sky Tether's really big on the Infiltrator because that also removes the ability for Stuart Parnes to sacrifice his creatures to maybe recycle that Gate Colossus. Is this the Screaming Shield?
It is.
Okay. But he's going to want, at least this turn, he's going to want to be able to Slime Bind the Arbiter and also keep up Thought Collapse. I don't think he's going to go for an equip this turn. And he also chooses to keep the Chillbringer back for defense this turn, given that he's at a very precarious 2 life.
Yeah. Yeah, even one of those Concordia Pegasus getting through could kill him, even though it's very unlikely, given that he has a Fairy Duelist and 2 Senate Couriers. But Mike making a game plan.
Is Quench going to... That's a Quench.
Was that a Quench?
Is that going to do anything? No, it's not going to stop the Slime Bind.
No, it would be able to counter a Thought Collapse.
Right.
So this actually does prevent Mike from doing both of the things that he needs to do.
Yeah, no,
turn.
that Quench is actually going to be very clutch here because
yeah,
Mike has to fire off Slime Bind on the Arbiter here.
Yes.
Stuart's then going to draw a card, play the Gate Colossus. Mike's going to then cast Thought Collapse, and Stuart's going to get it with the Quench.
Yeah, he will. But the Gate Colossus is something that Mike could find an answer. Like, that won't kill him in the immediate sense. So here's Slime Bind.
Well, but he will draw a card off the Gateway Sneak, which
Yes.
will then draw him the Colossus.
Mm-hmm. Yep, it is the top card of his library right now, and he will be able to cast it. The Colossus is a problem, but Mike could find an answer for it on the top of his library.
Right.
So he's not losing this turn, but Stuart maneuvering himself to a really nice position this game. And there's his Thought Collapse, and now Quench off the top of the library from Stuart Parnes says, no, sir. And that means the Gate Colossus is going to resolve for Stuart. Big trouble here for Mike Sigrist. He did win game number 1. Ooh. It was another Thought Collapse.
That's not going to get it done.
Is he going to start milling him? I don't suppose.
How many cards does Stuart have
he
left
probably
in his
has,
deck?
Over 15.
Yeah.
Right?
He hasn't drawn a ton of cards.
No, he's got 18 cards left if I count correctly.
Okay.
So he will not. There's not nearly enough mana.
Just in case. Keep in mind.
Yeah, 18.
Let's see. Oh no, Mike is actually not just dead because he can chump block for 1 turn with the Chillbringer, so he's on the mill plan here.
He actually needs Stuart to cast a spell here so that the Thought Collapse can add to the. And he did. He just ran out the Fairy Duelist.
And Mike might need to. I think Mike has to counter this.
I mean, he just has to,
because
right?
this is the only reason Stuart does this is because it leads to a lethal attack. Oh man!
Also, if Stuart just finds a gate, it's over, right? The Gateway Sneak would be
or a removal spell or anything.
There's Thought Collapse taking you from 18 to 15 plus your draw step.
Right.
So 14. It still feels like it's pretty far away, even for Screaming Shield and a bunch of mana. But it is a must counter for Sigrist, so he does.
So there's 5 blockers on board.
Maybe just a gate here for Stuart. Make this easy for him. No
gate would do it. Although he's got 5 in his deck and 4. Wait, he's got all 5 gates in play. He doesn't have any more gates.
So no gates. Okay.
No gates.
He found a plains.
But he can still.
He can loot.
But he has to be mindful. He has to count his deck and make sure somehow Mike can't just mill him out here because he can, scream with Screaming Shield. He can just move them around.
Yeah. Oh, he's just going to attack with everything. Is this a lethal attack?
It's 6 creatures. 6?
Yeah.
Oh, it is just a lethal.
Yeah,
it is just a lethal attack.
Yeah.
Okay.
And Stuart just says, you know what? If you have something, fine. I'm still coming out well ahead on this attack.
Right, and he can't die to the attack back either.
And so Sigrist on the way out says, let's see what else you sideboarded, my friend. And wow, and he did. boy, he had a Scavenger there as well, another great card against Mike's removal suite. And well done, Stuart, maneuvering himself to a win and really flexing that sideboard. That just 6 years portal going back early led to that one attack step with the Colossus, and that actually made a huge difference down the stretch, excuse me. Like, imagine if Sigrist was at 8 more life there. Right? Like, that's a lot of screaming shielding happening if he gets a big buffer like that.
Yeah, and that was a very, very timely quench. And even cards like the Guild Mage, right? Like, it takes so much for Mike to actually have enough power to attack through. Like, there might just be too many targets for the bindings. And on top of that, the fact that Stuart has answers to the bindings after sideboard, and really strong options too, right? The portal is one of those things, but even, you know, the Scavenger, for example, like, you just don't run it out. You just wait for Mike to play out his arrest effects, and then you have a 5/5 on the battlefield. And Mike's deck has a really tough time just dealing with giant creatures.
Like 8/8s?
8/8s, 5/5s, 6/6s.
I mean, Gate Colossus is really a nightmare for Mike. Like, none of his creatures can block it.
It's funny, too, because when Mike drafted his deck, I bet he was just like, Gate Colossus, at least I'm good against that one.
Yeah, I have a Sky Tether and the 3 Law Mages binding. Let's do a quick count here of the cards that he main decked, the creatures that can block Gate Colossus. Not profitably, of course. That's not the name of the game, but is it 2?
Oh, he's got the Arbiter. Wait, is it greater than 2?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so
it's got to be 3 or more.
So it's just 2. It's Chillbringer and Sphinx of Foresight.
No, you forgot one.
Oh, trained Caracal.
Prowling Caracal.
Prowling Caracal.
His key card.
My guess is he sideboarded that out.
Yeah, I think you're right. Boy. So he has the option. So actually then, if he sideboarded it out, he can't even multi-block with any combination of his creatures to kill it.
He has to lean very heavily on his removal spells and also counter magic.
Yeah, I'm just saying, like, even in theory, he can't put 8 power in front of it.
Honestly, it seems like the best route to victory for Mike is the mill plan, which is why you saw that Screaming Shield.
Yeah, I like that a lot. He needed just a little bit more room there, and he might have been able to get the job.
It is just very dicey, of course, because if he does fire off a Thought Collapse like turn 3, and then a Gate Colossus does get milled, then he's in a lot of trouble.
Yes. I mean, he could just Thought Collapse the Gate Colossus, right? Like, on the way back down.
Also, just imagine if one of these players just had, like, ill-gotten inheritances or something. Like, that card could just possibly go all the way.
Yeah. They just happened to not. I actually checked to see if Stuart did, because he is playing black and he doesn't have one in his pool.
I've drafted my fair share of just these really sweet controlling decks, and like have opponents just play ill-gotten inheritance turn 4 or 5, and I'm just like, I'm not even going to play anymore. I'm just going to lose.
Yeah, I know. I hate that feeling. It's almost as, like, the level of that feeling, though, is very similar to when I'm playing, like, a Gruul beatdown deck and my opponent plays Ill-Gotten Inheritance, and I'm like,
right, exactly.
Attack you for 8. Yeah, you just don't care about it.
Yeah, I mean, it is just death of 1,000 stings.
It is, yeah. It's just that when you're trying to make the game go to turn 26, those stings add up.
Right, exactly.
Yeah. Can't beat it. Yeah, that's another reason why I think Mortify is such a powerful card in this format. It's always powerful, right?
Of course.
Instant speed, unconditional removal is great, but that enchantment clause comes up way more often and against the cards you really care about very often. Yeah.
Absolutely. There's lots and lots of just very, very good targets for the Mortify that are not creatures. There's just lots of good enchantments for sure.
All right, looks like we're underway here in game number 3, so off we go. Will it be Stuart Parnes? Will it be Mike Sigrist? We're going to find out right now as we wind down our limited coverage here at the Mythic Championship in Cleveland. We'll be transitioning to Standard after this round is over.
And there goes all the attacks.
Sit back and relax, because there will not be any attacking for a little while here from players.
Oh, and Stuart has the card that I was talking about before the match even started, I believe. I think he's got that Angelic Exaltation in hand.
Oh, yeah.
So he can sneak that one through at some point.
Speaking of sneak, he just drew a Gateway Sneak. Not a bad combo with that card either.
Right. So Stuart at this point just kind of figuring out which card he's going to run into a counter spell.
Yeah, so this is interesting because we're actually going to get a chance to see whether he wants to risk it at all. He does have Quench in his hand. Or what his least important card is. It looks like Spirit of the Spires was his consideration.
Is he going to quench this?
I think you do, right?
I mean, you pretty much quench anything, right?
So I think you do. Like, I actually would quench that, but he didn't.
And there was that pause, so Mike might also just suspect a quench. And he also got quenched. So
Late game quench,
so
the
right.
worst kind of a quench.
So now you have to expect even more that Mike is going to play around it. So I would probably be more inclined to just fire it off when I can.
Dude, I would snap it off because Sigrist will torture you with that quench. He will leave it in your hand for the rest of the game.
Right, and this is a Chillbringer.
This is a test Chillbringer. And Sigrist says, sure. And I have to think that Stuart's like, okay, I guess I'm happy about that. But, like,
yeah, but
the quench window is closing very quickly here. Another Sphinx's Insight means that Mike is just not missing land drops anymore.
And here comes a Senate Courier, which
Boom.
just stops everything.
And he's left up Thought Collapse mana as well.
He does, but Stuart, he doesn't have a second blue source because he could have had Gateway Sneak plus Quench to fight a Thought Collapse.
But he's going to have to wait another turn if that's going to be his play. So the question is, does he just say finally, fine, here's Spirit of the Spires, counter it if you want?
Right.
The question is I don't think Mike cares about that card. That doesn't change combat at all.
Right. If Mike truly is on the plan of winning via milling, he might just let it resolve.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, he already has the Concordia Pegasus. The only difference with that on the battlefield is that if Stuart decides to attack with everything every turn, Mike takes one.
You're right.
It's like, fine. Ugh. It feels so bad to be on the opposite end of the table from a player of Sigrist's caliber in situations like this, because he's just never going to give you an inch. He will never, ever leave the shields down if he can help it. And his
he might have
judgment
shields
is so
up if he draws what
indeed,
he needs to,
indeed.
Right?
Yeah. And you know, the problem too is that Mike is so good at figuring out what cards really
this is a really
matter.
good window to play Angelic Exaltation. If Mike still has Thought Collapse, he now has the Quench backup here.
Oh,
we talk about
this.
how important this card is in the matchup. So this is big. And this is, Stuart being patient might pay off. Although, is that an Azorius Guildgate?
Yeah, the one on the bottom is. Yeah. And Mike has to go for it here. Right. So there's the Quench. So it did work out for Stuart Parnes, and he resolved an absolutely key card in a matchup like this. Now he has great attacks.
Gets in for 6
Boom.
This turn. That is a 6/7 attacking.
Yeah, this is huge swing in Stuart Parnes' direction, as I don't know what Mike does now. You can't kill all the creatures.
Right.
He's going to start jumping.
Blocking. Yeah,
wow.
I don't know if Mike has enchantment removal, or I don't know if he brought it in.
Yeah, Stuart patient with that Quench, and goodness sakes did it pay off for him. We're going to see precognitive perception here from Sigrist, his first pick of the draft. I don't even, well, bottom. 3 lands go to the bottom, but what is he even digging for at this point?
Well, you know what? He does have 1 exposed to daylight in a sideboard, but I don't know if he brought it in.
Well, he found 3. He put 3 lands on the bottom, and 3 found. Wow, and found 3 spells, but none of them answer the problems that he's facing at this point. He can buy himself some time, but yeah, it gets really awkward. Like he found a Law Mage's Binding. That's really awkward against the Angelic Exaltation because you have to play it before combat. Opponent goes, oh, fine, I'll just attack with this other thing.
And that's another big threat from Stuart. That was an Archway Angel.
Yeah.
And Stuart is going to be incentivized to just play out all of his creatures pre-combat because of the Exaltation on the battlefield.
There's a Gateway Sneak in his first main phase. That's the only one he can cast here. So, again, in comes the Chillbringer.
Now this is an attack for 7.
And it's not getting any lighter.
7/8.
Looks like we're going to see a Fairy Duelist chump block.
Just to take less damage. Maybe he chump blocks. He could also take 5 here.
Yeah, I think he's just going to chump. We'll see, though. Nope. He's going to take it. Down to 13. Pass the turn back, but I just don't see a way out unless Mike thought ahead and brought in Exposed to Daylight. He has to find that card. Otherwise, you mentioned it before the game, before the round even started, you were talking about Angelic Exaltation being a killer in a matchup like this, and we get to see it now.
Right.
So here we go. Can he find an answer? Land?
And I really...
That was Exposed to Daylight.
Was it?
Yes.
I was just going to say, I love the way Stuart's actually played out this game, being patient, setting it up, where he would have Quench back up to resolve the Exaltation. Now, if Mike did find that exposed to daylight, he's still in it.
He found it. Wow, I can't believe it. Mike
Big
Sigrist
draw.
actually found the answer. I'm like, right, the card right behind is exposed to daylight.
That is an exposed
Wow.
to daylight. Wow. Big draw.
Huge find there for Mike Sigrist.
Interesting.
Yeah,
No upkeep or anything.
Right. In fact, is he actually considering waiting another turn on this? It plays around Quench, and it gives him a chance to find a Thought Collapse, and he does have some life total to play with here. Sigrist very smart using Sky Tether ahead of time. That's going to save a card here.
All right, now he can fire it off because
Yes.
of the Angel.
Yes, so now the shields are well and truly down here, and we are back to business. Mike can just fire this off on the main phase and blunt the assault quite cleanly.
And
There it is.
Look at that sideboard card. I mean, to be fair, Mike has cast 3 Sphinx's
Yes.
Insights and a Precognitive
Yes.
Perception and scry 3 cards to the bottom.
Yeah, so he has dug, but he found it. Now the interesting part here, Paul, look at the clock. We're at 30 seconds left in the round.
Oh, yeah.
This could be a major issue for these players. You know, picking up a draw here, not what they want.
Yeah. Need to speed it up. Mike actually really wants to find Screaming Shield. That might be the
Yes.
fastest way he can actually reasonably
think
win
you're
this,
right.
win this match.
It's slow, but it's fast enough.
Right.
He's going to pass the turn back with 4 seconds left on the clock. Once the official time, ooh, was that Gate Colossus?
Stuart might have a chance here, but
Okay.
I think Mike has a Law Mage's Binding, so I
better.
don't think that's going to get it done.
It looks like they've got a few more minutes still on the clock. We're showing his time called, but it sounds like they've got a little under 3 minutes left still that they had added on or whatever for being in the feature match area. So we're not quite to that point yet, and we could very well still see a natural conclusion to this match.
And I like this. So if you're wondering why Mike did not fire off that Law Mage's Binding right away, it's possible that Stuart still has the Justicier's Portal in hand, so he wants to wait till Stuart's combat step after attacking so that if Stuart did have the portal, he wouldn't be taking that 8 points of damage. So very heads-up play. We're in a situation where Mike has a ton of mana available.
Yeah, he can't wait till after attacking, to be clear, but after, as long as it's on Stuart's turn.
Well, if it attacked, then he portaled.
Yeah,
then
but,
it would
but binding wouldn't stop it.
Oh, sure.
Yeah, so he has to do it during the main phase, but it has the same effect that you just said.
Right.
So and that's exactly what he did, and I'm with you, Paul. I love that play from Sigrist. He's saying if this isn't going to be a clean removal spell, it's going to fog that thing for a turn.
Right.
Okay. The Resolute Watchdog not high on the list here for Mike. He really does want to see that shield.
This Arbiter getting in, and Stuart's destroying some lands here. So
yeah, but Arbiter won't win the game, right? With the clock the way it is?
Yeah, I mean, if both players play pretty quickly, there is a chance.
Okay.
Because Stuart can't really do much. He's just going to keep playing cards off the top of his deck. Ooh, but that was a good draw. It's a shimmer of possibility.
Ooh. Well named in this position. Wow, he's got some choices here. The Archway Angel is the one that really makes it so that Mike can't win unless he does find some other way, because he's going to gain, what, 2, 4, 6 life here? And there's no way that Night Arbiter can get the job done in 1 minute and 18 seconds with even with the 5-turn rule.
Right.
And I don't know if that's the card that he took, but I
did.
believe it is. Okay.
Yeah. So that is 6 life to be gained for Stuart.
And it looks like he's just going to go ahead and Thought Collapse it.
Okay.
If anything, it just goes towards his mill plan.
Yeah, and Mike's game plan, very clear. Oh, there's the big ripped in blood.
You called it, man. Wow, you were all over. I love that Stuart went deep into the sideboard as you predicted. Okay, he needs Screaming Shield.
And you can tell, like, Mike's playing at
he just drew
blistering
Screaming
speed.
Shield.
Okay.
Yes, he just found Screaming Shield off the top of the library, and now all of a sudden he has this mana sink that he can use to start throwing
he's
it
gonna
on
move it
different creatures.
around.
He should activate it now and move it onto something
Yeah.
else. Although, is he 1 mana short from reactivating? Yes, he is.
Yeah, it's 2 to activate and 3 to move. Okay,
Yeah.
so I guess
So
he's just
maybe
gonna sit.
there's no point then. If he had 1 more mana, we'd for sure see him do that. But he may as well leave the mana up at this point, especially because he has stuff to do. Now, if he has a land drop to give, then we very well may see him do it.
And now that Mike is thinking, I mean, we are gonna just go into turns here.
Yeah, he won't be able to pass the turn back prior to that. And I think he has plenty of time to mill him out. He does have a land drop,
Okay.
so we're going to see him activate the Screaming Shield. Well, I should say activate the creature.
Oh, that was a very, very
Wow,
good,
that's a lot
good
of
mill
spells.
there.
Yeah, and now he can move it and then just pass a turn.
Right. And Stuart might be able to get some damage in now because a creature is tapped.
But his attack force is just so not where he needs it to be right now. There's just this year's portal.
Okay.
So we could use that to save the Colossus. But it gets a little bit awkward here because Sigrist does have another copy of the Law Mage's Binding that he can use to then relock it down again.
Yeah, but Stuart might be interested in firing it off main phase to play around Thought Collapse, which he's seen multiple copies of.
Yeah. And Mike just didn't have the luxury of keeping up the mana for a card like that.
Right. I mean, Mike is playing for the win here, so he needed to move everything around. And look at Stuart's also doing the same here. You're going to try to mill me out? Well, I'm going to try to kill you. Let's see what happens.
Yeah, and this is interesting because Mike actually does have a copy of Slimebind in his hand, but he would rather activate Screaming Shield. He's done some counting. And there we go. There's just this year's portal. But honestly, Mike's going to say, sure.
Yep.
You're going to save that, and then I'm going to put one right back on it on my turn. And in the meantime, each mill matters here for Mike Sigrist.
We're going to see a Screaming Shield victory here
I think
unless
we
Stuart
are.
draws something ridiculous.
Yes, he needs to find either one ridiculous thing or a string of ridiculous things, or else Mike is going to be able to just manage his mana effectively here and use Screaming Shield as effectively a way to turn his mana into a win condition that doesn't require combat. It is a very strange way to win a game, but in matchups like this happens.
Yeah, I mean, this is my favorite part, just like seeing these people, these players just like go really deep into their sideboards and figure out what the true win conditions are once the games go down to this type of state.
Yeah, I've been really impressed by both players here. They really understood this matchup. Stuart went super deep into the board very correctly, I think, and I'm really impressed by that. And I'll be honest, I kind of expect it from Mike at this point, having watched him play for so many years. But still, you know, this Screaming Shield's out of the board, and it looks like it's going to win him the match.
Yeah, even Stuart setting up the resolution of that Angelic Exaltation I was very impressed with. Playing around counter magic when he can, finding the right window to actually get it to resolve. Mike had to find that exposed to daylight or the game was over.
Yeah, and it took everything he had. It was only a couple of turns before he would have been dead. So we see activate Screaming Shield, then move it over to another creature. So how much mana does that leave him with? 3, 5, 7? So he can activate, move, and activate again?
Right, but he is at 11, so he does probably want
Yes.
3 mana up for Law Mage's Binding.
I think that he's pretty well clear of the ability to mill Stuart out. I don't think that that's going to be the problem within the turn.
It's just surviving
It's
this
his
turn.
life totals, yeah. But there's
And
a
I
Law
think that's-
Mage's Binding.
Yeah, and I think Mike has this game if Stuart can't have that many cards left in his library.
Right. And he's going to get milled for 3 and untap. And then I think Mike can probably just go mill you, move it, mill you, maybe even do it again. And then that's just going to be it.
Right, and he even has the Slimebind here, and still has the ability to activate the creature with the Screaming Shield.
Yeah, well, he can do one or the other.
Well, he played the Slimebind.
Oh, gotcha.
Right.
There it is. Yep. So, yeah, this is just Mike locking things up because you know what? Stuart has 2 lands in his hand, and this thing is done. Sigrist is going to get a quick
we got the count.
7, it looks like.
So 3 activations.
Yeah, and that's going to do it. Stuart Parnes extends the hand, and Mike Sigrist really puts on a show here. But I do want to I want to make sure that we recognize how well Stuart played in this match, and also the way that he managed his sideboard and brought in the things that he needed. He just ran into, well, Mike Sigrist.
Yeah, I mean, this was truly a match that was kind of determined by those sideboard strategies. We saw in Game 2, just this year's Portal being the key card for Stuart to actually win. And then in Game 3, he almost got there with the Exaltation, but then the Disenchant from Mike Sigrist was what was necessary for him to come back from that game. And then the Screaming Shield, of course.
And then the Screaming Shield that he needed to find as well. But we have to give Mike credit because he cast so many card draw spells to find them. It wasn't like he was just like, well, I hope I get there. You know, it was like cast a thing, bottom 3 cards, cast another one,
Yeah.
And he eventually
he cast all 4 of his card draw spells within the first 20 cards of his deck.
Yeah, so that's
he
2,
really
4,
dug very
6
deep.
plus 3 to the bottom and 3 extra cards.
Right.
Tons of stuff. So
Yeah.
great stuff from the limited portion, especially those down the stretch. We know that you limited fans love seeing those type of games, and that counts us in that mix. But we are now going to start transitioning over into the standard portions. First, though, we're going to set that up at the news desk, and before that, a quick commercial break. We'll see you in just a little bit.